My name is Corporal Daniel Mercer, United States Marine Corps. In 1995, I was attached to a provisional reconnaissance detachment staged out of Brunswick for a recovery operation tied to a classified communication facility near the Allagash watershed. Officially, the site did not exist. Unofficially, the people who built it called it Granite Echo. The paperwork we were shown used another name, Remote Atmospheric Listening Array, Station 4. We were told a winter storm had cut off contact with the site for 36 hours. We were told there were 6 civilian contractors and 2 Defense Department analysts inside. We were told local authorities had already lost 2 wardens and a state police snow unit trying to reach the access road. We were told there might be Soviet equipment on site, though by then nobody said Soviet with the same conviction anymore. We were not told why the briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and fear. Gunnery Sergeant Elias Pike led us. He was not a man who wasted motion. Flat voice, scar through one eyebrow. He could make a map look guilty just by staring at it. If Pike said step, you stepped. If Pike said hold, you became part of the ground. The rest of us were a patched-together team built for cold weather movement and recovery. Sergeant Jonah Price carried the squad automatic weapon and had the kind of steady breathing that made you think nothing in the world could surprise him. Staff Sergeant Warren Kessler handled comms, long range and short range, with 2 radios hanging from him like extra organs. Sergeant Isaac Bell was our marksman and point man, lean and silent, eyes always half narrowed, as if he was looking at something nobody else could quite bring into focus. Corporal Reed Harmon was our tracker, a Maine boy who could read a bent twig the way other men read street signs. Corporal Theo Moreau carried the grenade launcher and talked too much when he was cold, which meant he talked almost constantly. Corporal Mason Rourke was built like a bunker and fed the machine gun belts with a kind of grim affection. Hospital corpsman Sophia Alvarez was Navy, technically not Marine, but if you'd asked any of us in those woods, we would have said she was more Marine than the rest of us combined. Lance Corporal Nathan Dupree was our breacher, quiet and careful, always checking his gloves, always checking his charges, even when there was no door in sight. Lance Corporal Eli Winters was the youngest, broad-faced, eager, trying hard not to show it. Private First Class Caleb Shaw was attached late, intel liaison, which in the field translated to extra rifle and too many questions. And then there was me, carrying rifle, batteries, spare medical kit, and the unearned confidence of a man who had not yet seen something that could truly strip him down to nerve and instinct. We rolled north in blackout conditions through roads that looked abandoned by the world. Snowbanks rose higher than the hoods of the trucks. The sky was a black iron lid. When the convoy stopped at a logging turnout shortly before dusk, the cold hit like a physical blow. The air was so sharp it felt glassy in the lungs. Every exhale came out white and immediate. Pine sap and diesel hung together in the dark. A civilian in a parka waited beside a snowcat with the engine running. He had a sight badge turned backward on his chest, and the kind of face that looked older under fluorescent light. He did not introduce himself. He handed Pike a greased pencil map with the access road circled, then pointed deeper into the trees. "Roads blocked 1 mile in," he said. "Trees down. Drifted over. You'll have to continue on foot." Pike looked at him. What happened to recovery teams already sent in? The man swallowed. I watched the movement under his scarf. "Radio failure," he said. "Disorientation." They stopped answering. "Cause." The man hesitated. "Sound." Nobody said anything for a moment. The engine idled. Snow crystals whispered across the hood. "Say that again," Pike said. The man glanced toward the woods, and for the first time I saw a genuine panic in him. Not worry, not nerves. Panic kept under pressure until the seams showed. "They heard something in the timber," he said. Then they started answering voices that weren't on the net. Moreau gave a short breath through his nose, not quite a laugh. Kessler didn't smile. Pike folded the map. "Any wildlife reports?" The man's mouth worked once before any words came out. "No bears this time of year. Moose. Coyotes. There are stories from the locals, but stories don't go on my log," Pike said. The man looked at him for a long second and then said quietly, "Maybe they should." We moved out at 1710. Snowshoes been to crust and powder with a dry squeal. Branches drooped heavy with ice. Our red lens lamp stayed low and brief. The woods closed around us almost immediately. The access road had once been gravel, wide enough for service vehicles, but drift had turned into a pale trench between black trunks. Wind came and went in thin blades, setting frozen needles to a faint hiss overhead. The first hour was clean, orderly, the kind of movement Marines trust. Interval set, pace steady. Radio checks every 15 minutes. 17 hours, 26 minutes, and 14 seconds / Birch actual. Com check. 17 hours, 26 minutes, and 18 seconds / Birch 2. Good copy. 17 hours, 26 minutes, and 21 seconds / Birch 3. Good copy. 17 hours, 26 minutes, and 24 seconds / Birch 4. Good copy. Voice is dry and routine. Human. Harmon found the first break in expectation at 1813. He crouched by the left edge of the road and held up a fist. We froze. Snow settled around us with a soft ticking sound. I saw it when I knelt beside him. Tracks crossing the road. Not boot prints. Not deer. Not coyote. Too long. Too narrow. The stride was wrong. Each impression sank deep at the front like something was putting all its weight on the ball of the foot, then barely touching with the heel. 5 points, but not spread like toes. More like thin, grasping digits that had clenched and released the snow. Harmon touched the edge of one print without speaking. Frost smoked off his glove where it brushed the packed surface. Recent. Pike asked. Harmon nodded once. Human? Shaw said. No one answered him. Bell had already shifted to the tree line, rifle angled, watching ahead. Alvarez leaned closer to the track, and her breath drifted white over it. There's no melt, she said. It should have softened where pressure hit. It looks frozen from the inside. Morrow muttered, That's helpful. Then we heard it. Clack! Far off to our right. One hard knock of wood on wood. Everybody turned. Silence afterward seemed to rush in and pile up around it. A branch can fall that way. Ice can split. A deer can hook a trunk with its antlers. There are always explanations when you are still close enough to reason. Then it came again. Clack, clack, clack. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Harmon rose slowly. That wasn't a branch. Pike made the decision in under a second. Stay on mission. Bell point. Kessler, note direction. Nobody answers anything not verified on channel. We move again, but the woods had changed. Nothing visible. Just pressure. The feeling that our little file of green shapes and metal and breath had become known. At 1852, we reached the first abandoned vehicle, a state police snow unit half off the road, and drifted nearly to the windows. The windshield was cracked from the inside. One door hung open. No bodies. No blood. The engine block was cold. Snow had blown across the seats, covering them in a clean white layer, except for 5 gouges in the dashboard plastic, long and curved. As if someone wearing knives had dragged a hand across it. Dupree found a radio handset on the floorboard with the cord snapped. Kessler picked it up, turned it over, and held it close to his lamp. There were bite marks in the rubber. Actual bite marks. Morrow saw them too and stopped talking for the first time that night. Pike had us form perimeter while Bell and Harmon swept 20 meters into the trees. I stood near the rear of the vehicle with Winters, watching our own tracks slowly soften under falling snow. The smell, there was old exhaust, vinyl, and something sweet underneath, like rotten apples kept too long in a cellar. Winters shifted beside me. You smell that? I nodded. He said, What is that? Before I could answer, Kessler raised his head. Traffic. We closed on him. A voice crackled through the long-range set, buried in static. Hello. If this is recovery, answer. Please, answer. Male voice. Thin. Trembling. Pike took the handset. This is Birch actual. Identify. Static surged. Then, Henderson. Site tech. Granite echo. We locked the lower doors. They're in the walls now. Everyone around that radio went still. Pike's face did not change. How many personnel alive? A wet rasp of breath on the other end. I can hear them asking for my mother. Kessler looked up so fast his headset wire jerked. The transmission dissolved into hissing. Then a new voice pushed through the same channel. Not Henderson. Birch Actual. It said in Pike's exact voice, calm and clipped, hold position. The sound of our own leader speaking from the radio in his own hand locked every muscle in my body for a heartbeat. Pike did not even blink. Kessler, not our encryption. Kessler said at once. His face had gone gray under the nose. Then the radio laughed. I know what human laughter sounds like over bad equipment. I know how distortion flattens it. This was not that. This was a sequence of human notes assembled in the wrong order, as if something had listened, learned, and still not understood where joy actually lived in the throat. Pike switched the set off. Nobody said anything. He looked at each of us in turn. You hear your own name. You confirm visually before moving. You hear my voice from anywhere you can't touch me. You ignore it. We are not splitting. We are not chasing. We get to the site, recover who we can, destroy what we have to, and come out together. Move. We left the abandoned snow unit and pressed north under thickening dark. The cold deepened until the inside of my nostrils stuck together when I breathed in too fast. Frost crept along sling hardware and the edges of magazines. Somewhere above the clouds, the sky brightened faint green. Not enough for light, just a dim stain, the kind aurora sometimes lays across winter nights. It made the snow look sick. Around 1930, the knocks started following our pace. 3 to the right. Then, after a delay, 3 to the left, then farther ahead. Not random. Measuring. Bell signaled twice that he'd seen movement. Each time we halted and aimed into black ranks of spruce, and each time there was nothing to fire at. I caught fragments, a pale line between trunks, a bend too high off the ground, the impression of shoulders where no human could have stood without brushing branches. Shaw began whispering prayers under his breath, not loud enough to carry, but enough for me to hear when I fell back beside him. What did Intel tell you? I asked. He kept his eyes on the trees. Nothing useful. That is not an answer. He licked cracked lips. They said the site was listening for repeating patterns in upper atmosphere noise. They said something repeated back. Before I could press him, Bell snapped his fist up. Contact front. We dropped, knees into snow, rifles up. At first I saw only trees and drifting powder. Then a shape crossed the road 30 yards ahead. It moved left to right in one impossible smooth bound. Too tall and too thin. The upper body bent forward, forelimbs hanging long enough to brush the snow. No sound except the tiny dry collapse of powder, where it landed behind a screen of fur. Winters made a choke sound. Price hissed for silence. My whole body had gone tight, and hot inside layers already rhymed with cold. Training gives you procedures. It does not give you language for when your eyes tell you that a body moved like that. Pike said very quietly, Bell. Bell shifted one step forward, breath once, and then the woods exploded with noise. Not gunfire. Voices. A dozen overlapping human voices from ahead, behind, both flanks, all speaking at once in short, desperate bursts. Help me? Over here. Document. Mercer. Please. I heard my own mother say my first name the way she used to when I was little and running too close to traffic. For one deranged instant, I almost stood. Alvarez grabbed the back of my harness and slammed me down harder into the snow. Do not, she whispered into my ear. Sharp enough to cut. The voices ended as suddenly as they had started. Then came the 3 knocks again, closer than ever. Clack, clack, clack. Bell fired. The muzzle flash blew orange through the trees. 2 more shots followed, controlled, precise. Something shrieked back at him. That sound still finds me in sleep. It began high like metal scraping glass, then broke open into a wet animal bellow threaded through with recognizable human syllables. Not words, pieces of them. Fragments pulled apart by hunger. Move, move, Pike ordered. We surged forward to Bell's position. Snow sprayed under boots and shoes. Branches lashed at sleeves. Kessler almost lost his footing on buried rock. I saw where Bell's rounds had struck a trunk at head height, then the blood on the snow beyond. It was black in the green light, not dark red, not brown, black and glossy like oil. Harmon crouched over it for half a second and then backed away. still warm. Pike made the call to accelerate. Sight was less than a mile ahead. We tightened interval, pushed harder, and the woods pushed back. The road bent west into lower ground where the drifts deepened around our thighs. Wind died completely. Sound changed there. Every breath, every strap creak, every click of metal felt magnified, as if we had entered a room with invisible walls. At 2011, Kessler reported interference across every band. At 2014, Bell stopped again and pointed upslope. I followed the angle of his barrel and finally saw one clearly. It was standing between two trunks, maybe 60 yards away, and for a second my brain rejected what my eyes handed it. Too tall. Its head sat too high, neck craned forward like something perpetually listening. The skin looked stretched tight in some places and hanging loose in others, as if different bodies had been assembled beneath it and none of them agreed on shape. The rib cage showed through pale hide in long curved shadows. The arms were longer than the legs and ended in narrow hands that flexed against the bark behind it, not resting there, but gripping. The face, that was the worst part. Not because it resembled a deer exactly. It didn't. That was the lie people tell themselves, because antlers give the mind a place to stop. What I saw had antler growths erupting from the skull in asymmetrical blackened branches. Yes, but the front of the head carried remnants of a human arrangement. The forward-facing eyes sunk too deep. The suggestion of cheeks pulled taut, the wet split of mouth that extended farther than it should have, all the way toward the hinge of the jaw. It was as if a starving man had been stretched over the idea of a stag, and then taught to stand upright. Its eyes reflected no lamp. They looked like frozen water under moonlight, although there was no moon. It watched us with stillness, so complete it felt ceremonial. Then it raised one hand and tapped the tree beside its head 3 times with one long finger. Clack! 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 Rourke opened up. The machine gun tore the night wide. Tracers slashed through branches. Bark burst. Snow leapt. The creature moved with a speed so abrupt it seemed to vanish between frames of vision. One instant there. The next somewhere lower, farther left, then gone altogether. But not before I saw Bell's round strike one antler and shear off a splinter of black material that spun through the air like burnt bone. The firing stopped. Powder smoke and sap mixed sharply in the cold. No body. No follow-up. Only silence and our own breathing. Not a hallucination, Morrow said hoarsely. Nobody argued. Granite Echo appeared at 2049 behind a windbreak of spruce and chain-link fencing half buried in drift. It had once been a radar or a relay station. Squat concrete buildings around a larger dome now collapsed on one side, antenna masts rising blind and iced over. Security lights were dead. One generator shed glowed faintly through a slit of boarded insulation. The whole place looked as if it had been abandoned years ago, except for the fresh clawing at the snow around the fence line. Human boot prints led in. A second set led out. The outward tracks did not return. Dupree cut the chain, and we slipped through one by one. Inside the perimeter, the smell changed. Less pine, more metal, ozone, electrical heat, and that same sweet rot. Stronger now, woven with something animal and wet. The main door to the operations building stood open 6 inches. Not broken. Open. Pike held us there while Kessler tried the sight frequency again. Only static answer, but beneath it very faint. I heard the same 3-beat rhythm pulsing through the speaker. Not knocks this time. A low signal. 3 bursts. Pause. 3 bursts. Shaw had gone pale enough to look luminous. What is it? Pike asked him. Shaw swallowed. Maybe a handshake protocol, he said. For what? Shaw looked at the dark gap of the doorway and said, for something answering back. We entered Granite Echo at 2058. Inside, the air felt wrong immediately, warmer than outside, but not with the clean, dry warmth of generators. This warmth was damp, carrying the stink of mildew, open batteries, and meat left too long in wrappers. Our lamps cut cones through dust and suspended frost. Hallway walls were cinder-block, painted government beige. Fluorescent tubes overhead flickered without current, dim pulses ghosting from a backup line somewhere deeper in the structure. There was blood on the floor in, thin drag arcs. One boot, human, lying on its side near the duty desk. The receptionist's window had been punched through from inside, glass scattered across a clipboard covered in weather readings and time stamps. I kept my rifle on the far end of the corridor, while Pike and Alvarez checked the immediate rooms: file storage, break room, empty bunk area with blankets flung aside, coffee still frozen in a mug where it had spilled. Then Morrow found the first body, or enough of one to name it. A man in civilian thermal gear wedged halfway into an air duct above a utility room, shoulders and head inside, hips hanging down. His fingers had worn bloody crescents into metal, trying to pull himself farther up. There was no lower left leg, not torn off with one clean trauma, worked through in stages. Alvarez looked up, jaw set hard. Dead hours ago. Kessler turned away and took a breath through his mouth. Pike said, "Keep moving." We found Henderson in the generator room, alive, technically, sitting on the floor with his back to the fuel tank, parka open, skin gray with sweat and fever. His eyes were so wide the white showed all around. He had written the same phrase down both arms in blue marker until the letters climbed over themselves. "Don't open when they knock. Don't open when they knock. Don't open when they knock." He flinched when our lamps hit him and tried to bring up a wrench like a pistol. Marine recovery. Alvarez said, kneeling carefully, "You're safe for the moment. How many are left?" Henderson's teeth chattered even in the warm room. "You came after dark." No one answered that. His gaze snagged on Shaw and held. "You heard it too, didn't you?" Shaw said nothing. Pike crouched in front of Henderson. "How many alive?" Henderson wet his lips. "2. Maybe 3. Lower station." Dr. Vale locked the chamber. Said if it got past level 2, we burned the core. "What core?" He gave a weak little laugh that broke halfway through and turned into a sob. "There isn't one word for what they built down there." Alvarez checked his pulse, then looked up at Pike. "He's hypothermic and shocked. Can he move?" Henderson answered for her. "No." Pike's eyes flicked once around the room, measuring time and distance and bodies. "Price, Winter stay with Henderson. Everyone else with me. Kessler, lay guideline. We go down, get the survivors, assess the equipment, then we exfil." Price did not like it, but he nodded. Winters looked as if he wanted to object and knew better. Before we left, Henderson grabbed my sleeve with surprising force. "Do not let them call you by rank," he whispered. His fingers were icy through my layers. "They get better when they're close." The stairwell to the lower station was steel and concrete, descending beneath the operations building into older construction. The air cooled again as we went down, and with it came a new sound, a faint rhythmic tapping from below, not loud enough to echo cleanly, more like careful nails on pipes. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Emergency lighting had failed in half the corridor at the bottom. The illuminated sections buzzed weakly, bathing the place in a nicotine-yellow haze. We passed doors marked archive. Signal processing, sub-level storage. Several stood open. One had been blocked from the outside with a wheeled shelf and all the shelf brackets bent outward, as if something inside had tested them repeatedly. Kessler's guideline hissed off the spool behind us. Bell took point. I covered rear. In enclosed spaces, with concrete clothes and ceilings low, fear changes texture. Outside in the woods, it had been vast and anticipatory. Down there it became immediate mechanical. Your body keeps trying to read danger from corners and shadows and distances that collapse too fast. The main lab door at the end of the corridor had a magnetic lock, hanging dead, and a handwritten sign taped across it. Do not answer the radio. Morrow read it and murmured, "Bit late?" Inside, Granite Echo stopped pretending to be a weather station. Banks of real systems and rack-mounted processors lined the walls around a sunken central pit enclosed by railing. Cables ran everywhere. Thick black bundles descending into floor through a circular opening cut in older concrete. Oscilloscopes, waveform monitors, recording decks. Half the equipment had been smashed. The rest still blinked on reserve power, screens crawling with frozen or repeating traces. In the middle of the nearest table lay a tape reel still spinning very slowly, though the machine it belonged to was off. Dr. Allenvale was alive on the far side of the room, with a revolver in his hand and blood down one sleeve. He was maybe 50, beard shot with gray, shirt collar dark with sweat. Beside him crouched a woman in sight coveralls, holding a flare gun like she fully intended to use it. When our lamps hit them, Vale almost fired. "Hold," Pike barked. Vale froze, then sagged visibly. "You are very late." The woman started laughing and crying at the same time. Alvarez moved her first. "Name," Pike said. "Dr. Vale. Emily Soren, acoustics analyst." His eyes darted to the doorway behind us. "Did they follow you in?" "No contact inside yet," Pike said. "What are we looking at?" Vale stared at him for a long second, then at the Marine spread around his ruined lab. I saw a calculation in him, and shame, and the desperate hope of man deciding whether truth would get him killed faster than lies. "We were using high-altitude aurora reflection to test long-range pattern acquisition," he said. "Mostly noise filtration, number stations, deep atmospheric scatter, passive listening. Then we began receiving structure returns from directions with no terrestrial origin." Morrow exhaled impatiently. "English, Doctor." Vale swallowed. "We sent signals into the upper layers, and something sent them back improved." The room seemed to tighten around that sentence. "Improved how?" Pike asked. "It learned our compression, then our language markers, then voice print architecture. At first it only echoed, then it selected names, reassurance phrases, distress phrases. It performed better in storms, better near tree density, better near hunger states in animal populations." Shaw stepped closer without seeming to realize it. "The field adaptation model," he whispered. Vale looked at him with sudden recognition. "You knew?" Shaw's face folded in on itself. "Not this part." Soren spoke from under Alvarez's hand. "It wasn't in the sky." Everybody turned to her. Her lips trembled. "That is what Dr. Vale still does not want to say. It was never in the sky." Vale shut his eyes once. "We think," he said carefully, "the signal was using the atmosphere, not originating there." "From where?" Pike said. No one answered. Then the tapping came from beneath the floor. 3 knocks. Every Marine in that room shifted aim downward or toward the doorway on instinct. Soren made a helpless sound. "That means it knows we're all here now." Bell moved to the central pit and angled his light down through the railing. The shaft beneath did not end where it should have. Granite echo had been built over older excavation. Rough stone walls ringed with newer supports and cable trays. The cables descended into blackness, and from that blackness rose a smell so foul and sweet it almost made me gag. Rot, blood, damp mineral cold. Under it all, a living musk like wet fur burned over fire. Bell said very softly, "I have movement." We joined him at angles. Something pale slid below the lowest visible rung. Then another shape higher on the opposite wall. Not climbing like men use ladders. Clinging, crossing vertically with insect precision. Rourke's machine gun barked. Concrete spat chips. Sparks flashed below. A scream came up from the shaft, then another answering it from somewhere in the corridor outside the lab. Not one creature. Several. "Contact all around," Kessler shouted. And then the lights went out. Absolute dark hit, with such force it felt physical. Our lamps snapped on in frantic cones. Voices collided. Door. Left. Movement, movement. Glass shattered somewhere behind me. Bell fired once. Something slammed into the far equipment racks hard enough to topple them. Metal rang. Reels burst loose, tapes streaming like black intestines across the floor. My beam caught a limb first. Long jointed wrong. Too many directional changes between shoulder and hand. Then the body attached to it reared up over the table in the center of the room, and the whole scene narrowed to white tunnel vision. Its chest was concave with the ribs showing like fingers pressing from inside. Antlers scraped the hanging cable tray overhead. Spraying rust. One eye was gone, the socket dark and deep, but the other stared straight into the light without flinching. Its mouth opened not downward but sideways, skin peeling at the corners as it widened, and it said in Alvarez's voice, "Daniel, help me." I fired until the bolt locked. The rounds tore through shoulder and throat, black fluid flashing in the beam. It did not fall like a shot animal. It folded and launched, crossing half the lab on all fours, clearing the table in a soundless arc straight at Bell. Bell pivoted brilliantly. Too late by half a heartbeat. It hit him chest high and drove him into the wall. I heard vertebrae crack over gunfire. Its hand, if that is what it was, closed around his face and crushed him there in one intimate motion. When it pulled away, Bell dropped without a sound. Rourke cut the creature in half at the waist with a machine gun. The upper torso still crawled 2 more feet, clawing, jaw working, until Moreau put a 40mm round into the equipment rack beside it and blew the whole corner into smoke, fire, and screaming metal. The blast threw me behind a desk. My ears went flat. Heat slapped through the freezing room. I rolled, grabbed Bell's fallen rifle by reflex, and looked up into chaos. 2 more had come through the broken ceiling panels or vents or places I still cannot name. One ran along the wall itself, fingers punching cinder block dust into the air, before dropping onto Kessler. He got an arm up in time to save his throat, and the creature bit through the radio on his chest instead, showering sparks and battery acid. Pike put 3 rounds into its spine, and Dupree finished it with his shotgun at almost point-blank range. The recoil knocked Dupree back into the railing. Then the tapping started again from every direction, not on trees, on the walls, the floor, the underside of tables, inside vents. 3 knocks, repeated, multiplied, converging until it felt like the whole room had become a drum being played by invisible fingers. Soren broke. She tore free of Alvarez and ran for the corridor, screaming that they were in the lights. They were in the lights. Pike shouted for her to stop. She made it 3 steps into the hall. Something descended from the ceiling, just beyond the door, upside down, almost graceful. I saw Soren look up, saw the realization land. The thing caught her under the jaw and behind one shoulder and lifted. Not dragged. Lifted. Her flare gun went off into the ceiling tiles, spraying red fire and white smoke. For a fraction of a second the corridor was bathed in blood-colored light, and I saw 3 more shapes stacked along the walls like waiting spiders. Then Soren was gone into the dark above, heels kicking against cinder block, scream cut short with a wet choking sound. Nobody could help her. That is the kind of truth combat sometimes teaches. There are distances too short to cross in time. Fall back, Pike ordered. Stairwell now. We move by fragments. Cover. Drag. Fire. I grabbed Kessler by the harness when he stumbled. Half his chest rig melted and hissing. Moreau and Rourke burst into the doorway. Alvarez checked Bell with one hand, while firing past the table with the other, then looked once at Pike and shook her head. Bell stayed. We lost the room and gained the corridor in a rush of powder smoke, sparks, and failing emergency lights. Shaw was crying openly as he fired. Dupree kept counting shells under his breath. Harmon, who had barely spoken all night, said, "They're pushing us, not rushing us." He was right. They were hurting. Every time we turned to engage, they broke line of sight and reappeared farther down the route we had to take, tapping from side passages, drawing attention, splitting angles, intelligent pressure, coordinated movement, not feral, tactical. Halfway to the stairs, Henderson's voice came over Kessler's ruined spare handset. "Don't come back up." Kessler stared at the device in disbelief. He had not touched transmit. "Don't come back up," Henderson repeated, voice bubbling with fear. "They're wearing the others now." Price answered from the actual channel at the same instant. Faint through static. Birch actual. Contact in generator room. Repeat. Contact in... A burst of gunfire cut him off. Then Winters screamed. Pike's face changed then for the first time. Not panic. Pain forced into command shape. "Move." We ran. The stairwell door stood open. Blood streaked the push bar. Price stumbled through it backward, firing one-handed, face and beard sprayed black. Winters came after him with eyes so wide I thought he had gone blind. Then something hit the back of Winters's head from above. Not a bite, a strike. He pitched forward onto the stairs, and before he could even throw his hands out, a long hooked limb snared his ankle and hauled him upward over the steps with unbelievable force. His chin cracked on concrete, teeth scattered. He vanished around the upper, landing shrieking through a mouth full of blood. Price lunged after him on pure instinct. Pike caught his rig and stopped him. For a second, Price fought like a hooked animal, roaring Winters' name. The answering roar came from above. Not one throat, several. Then the sound of feeding. Price went still. That stillness was worse. Pike dragged him down the stairs 2 at a time. We sealed the stairwell door behind us with a crash bar and a steel cabinet shoved across it, but the impact began almost immediately from the other side. 3 hits. Pause. 3 hits. The metal bowed inward with each cycle. At the bottom of the stairs was a lower chamber none of us had known existed. Rough stone walls. Older than the station. Old enough that the concrete foundations overhead looked like a recent insult built on top of something buried and patient. Thick cables fed to the center of the room into a column of black material, rising from the earth like melted antler or volcanic glass, ribbed with copper windings and studded with transducers. A machine. And not. The air around it thrummed at a frequency I felt in my teeth. Shaw whispered, "No." Vale, panning behind us, said, "The relay nexus. You built this." Moreau snapped. "No," Vale said. That single word dropped through the room like ice water. They had not built it. They had found it. Maybe in an older dig. Maybe in a cave. Maybe in a place the locals had known to avoid for centuries, while clever men with budgets and antennas told themselves folklore was just weather wearing a mask. The column pulsed. Every radio we carried woke at once. Voices burst from them in overlapping layers. Every familiar voice we had heard that night. Some we had not, all speaking in calm, clipped military tones. Stack right. "Advance!" Clear left. "Mercer, come here." Open the door. Rourke ripped the battery from his set. It kept talking. Alvarez pressed her palms over her ears and still flinched. The knocks on the stairwell door stopped. The silence afterward felt like a hell breath. Then something moved in the dark beyond the chamber. There was another passage leading deeper into the stone. Harmon trained his light there and said, "That's not rock." He was right again. The passage walls were scored with old marks, parallel grooves repeating upward beyond visibility, as if generation after generation of something tall and starving had sharpened itself there. Vale stepped toward the black column with the revolver hanging forgotten at his side. His face had gone distant. "It wanted language," he said. "Then it wanted shape. We gave it both. We taught it how to approach us." Pike turned on him. "Can it be destroyed?" Vale looked at the copper-wrapped column and nodded once. Fuel reservoir under the generator room. A shaped detonation at the conduit bed could cook the whole lower level if the line is breached. Dupree was already moving. "I've got satchel charges." Pike pointed. "Do it." Moreau and I went with Dupree to plant them while Rourke and Price covered the deep passage. Kessler, barely functional, tried to reestablish contact with whatever remained outside the valley. Alvarez worked on stopping the bleeding in his arm, where shards from the melted radio had cut deep. We moved fast and low through the utility run under the generator chamber, following conduits through heat and fuel stink. Overhead, footsteps or claws clicked across grating. Dupree set charges with hands that shook only once. When a whisper came down the pipe above us in his own voice, asking if his daughter still had the red bicycle, he froze for maybe half a second. Then he shut his eyes, set the primer, and kept working. That was the pattern of the whole night. Half seconds where a human heart tried to answer something wearing love. We were heading back when Moreau stopped, so suddenly I almost hit him. "What?" I hissed. He pointed his lamp down. A line of prints crossed the oily dust in front of us. Bare human footprints. Small, child-sized. Each one filled slowly with black fluid, seeping up from the concrete. The lamp in Moreau's hand trembled. "There are no children here." A breath touched the back of my neck. "Hot." I spun and fired. The muzzle flash showed the conduit corridor empty, except for pipes and shadow. Then Moreau screamed. One of them had been on the ceiling above the junction, flattened into darkness. It dropped onto him with all 4 limbs wrapped around his torso before my sight recovered from the flash. They went down hard. Moreau's launcher clanged away. The thing drove its antlered head against his face again and again with short, savage thrusts. Not biting yet, stunning him, like a predator that knew exactly how to disable a helmeted target. I jammed Bell's rifle muzzle into its side and fired 3 times. Black fluid sprayed hot across my gloves. It turned and looked at me at arm's length. Its face was Moreau's face from the nose down. Not perfectly. Better than before. Trying him on. Its mouth flexed around a smile it had seen somewhere and not understood. Then Moreau pulled his combat knife from his vest and rammed it up under the creature's jaw. He screamed as he did it. A full raw sound from the bottom of the body. The thing convulsed. I grabbed Moreau's shoulder straps and yanked while he kept stabbing. Together we tore him free. Move. I shouted. We stumbled back toward the chamber. Moreau bleeding from punctures under the collar, and one cheek flayed open where Antler had raked him. He kept trying to speak and spitting blood instead. When we reached the others, Price and Rourke had already engaged something in the deep passage. The chamber looked like the inside of a failing heart. Lamps swinging, breath smoking, static screaming. The black column pulsing brighter in dull internal waves. Shapes moving just outside light range in the farther tunnel. Pike took one look at Moreau and then at Dupree. Charges set. Dupree nodded. Timer. Remote trigger and 90-second backup. Pike made the next decision with terrible speed. We exfil now. That should have been the end of it. Set charges. Fall back. Detonate. Standard words. Standard hope. But the thing in the chamber had one more move ready. Kessler cried out and pointed the guideline we had laid from the stairs. It was moving, not because of wind or recoil or anyone stepping on it. Something was pulling it back into the dark beyond the stairwell. Hand over hand. A tactical recovery of our route. Then Winter stepped out from behind the black column. He wore his helmet. He held his rifle at low ready. His face was mostly intact except for the mouth, which hung wrong, wider on one side, blood black in the corners. One eye wandered slightly outboard. He should not have been able to stand. He should not have been able to do anything. "Gunny," he said in a child's and ruined voice, "I found a way out." Price broke. He took one step forward before Pike hit him square in the chest and drove him back. That saved his life. Winters' body opened at the ribs, not like flesh splitting, like a coat parting. 2 long pale limbs unfolded from inside him and struck where Price had been, fast as snakes. One hit Pike in the shoulder and spun him sideways into the stone wall. The other buried claws in Rourke's throat guard and ripped it halfway free. Rourke fired from the hip, point blank. Winters' torso burst apart, but the thing inside was already moving, uncoiling out of meat and cloth and bone with a dry, wet sound I cannot write without tasting bile. It had used him, worn him, and when it no longer needed the disguise, it stepped out. That was the moment I understood what Henderson had meant by wearing the others, not hiding in skins, entering trauma, learning posture, filling open spaces. Rourke never got a second burst. Another creature hit him from the side out of the tunnel, jaws closing over the top of his skull and shoulder. The weight carried both of them down. Price emptied half a magazine into the mass, but by the time it rolled clear, Rourke was still in the way it had become still. 3 of ours gone now. Bell, Winters, Rourke. Only we did not have the luxury to count them yet. "Trigger it," Pike shouted. Dupree slapped the remote. Nothing happened. Kessler swore for the first and only time I ever heard from him. Interference. The black column pulsed brighter as it pleased. More shapes were coming through the deeper passage now, not charging, not frantic, advancing in a staggered crescent with awful patience, tapping claws on stone in the same 3-beat rhythm, coordinating, spacing, hurting us against the stairwell where the door had already begun to bend inward under renewed impacts from above. Alvarez dragged Pike to his feet. His left arm hung badly. "Backup timer," Dupree said. 90 seconds from set. Closer to 60 now. Pike looked once at the stairwell, once at the passage, and understood we would never get the whole team through both. This is the part 1 replay most often. Not the killings, not the faces. This decision. He grabbed Moreau's vest and shoved him toward me. "Mercer, take Kessler, Shaw, Moreau, Doc, and Price. Up the service shaft." "What shaft?" I said. Vale pointed behind the column with a shaking hand. Maintenance ladder. Comes out near the west generator vent. Dupree with us, I said. Pike did not answer quickly enough. My chest went cold. No, I said. He looked straight at me. That is the order. Dupree saw it too. He went still, then gave one sharp nod like a man accepting coordinates. I'll make sure the line breaches, he said. Price said, we are not leaving you. Pike's expression turned hard enough to crack stone. You are, Sergeant. Something shrieked from the passage and lunged. Pike pivoted and fired one-handed. Dupree slung his shotgun, ripped the second detonator from his kit, and ran for the conduit line. Go, he shouted. There are moments where obedience feels like treason. We had won. We moved. The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for geared bodies climbing fast. Iron rungs slick with frost. Old fans dead in their housings. Behind us the chamber erupted into gunfire and the dry hammering rhythm of claws on stone. Morrow nearly fell twice. Alvarez kept shoving him upward. Kessler lost his headset and let it dangle. Shaw was sobbing again, breath coming in ragged animal whines he could not control. Halfway up, the explosion hit. Not full detonation. A first rupture. Fuel or conduit. The shaft lurched under us with a metallic scream. Heat rolled up from below, so suddenly it scorched the backs of my hands through gloves. Then came Pike's voice from beneath us on the radio. Clear for one final second through all the static in the world. Birch actual. Burn it. Then gunfire. Then 3 knocks directly under my boots. Clack, clack, clack. Something was climbing after us. Faster. Alvarez yelled. I looked down. In the red emergency glow rising from below, I saw antlers threading up the shaft between the rungs. Black fluid steaming on the metal. One pale hand closed over a rung, only 4 bodies below Shaw's boots. He saw it too and screamed so hard his voice broke. I fired downward one-handed while clinging to the ladder. The confined flash turned the shaft white. Round sparked. The hand slipped. Another replaced it instantly from the side wall, those impossible fingers digging into steel mesh where no human weight could hold. Then the full detonation came. The lower station vanished in a blast of heat and pressure that punched us upward like cartridges through a barrel. Metal tore. My helmet cracked against a ladder housing. Shaw lost his grip entirely, and Alvarez caught the back of his vest one rung before he fell past us all. Fire blossomed below in orange and black. The climbing thing disappeared into it, with a sound like every radio in the world screaming at once. We burst in the shaft through a ruptured generator vent into the open night. Snow, air, the shock of cold at the face like drowning in ice water. We spilled into a drift behind the west outbuilding as granite echo convulsed. Flame rolled from broken windows. The main operations roof lifted and dropped. Antenna masts groaned against the sky. A column of sparks shot up green against the low clouds, and for one impossible second the aurora above brightened in direct answer, not reflection. Answer. Price turned to go back for Pike and Dupree. The west wall folded inward before he made 3 steps. The whole lower section of the building collapsed with a grinding roar, sending a fountain of fire and snow into the dark. Something inside screamed once and cut off. Price stood there shaking, rifle hanging useless. 9 of us remained in the yard. Pike and Dupree were gone, and yet the operation was not over. That is the piece nobody understands unless they have been in a fight where survival itself becomes only the midpoint, because the woods were still there, and they were still in them. The blast had not killed all of them. Maybe it had not killed most. Maybe the buried machine was only one mouth of a larger thing threading the forest roots and old caves and starved animals for miles. We heard the knocks almost at once beyond the perimeter fence. 3 on the north side, 3 on the east, then 3 from the access road behind us, surrounding, organizing. Price came back to himself in that sound. We exfil now. Nobody argued. Kessler got one narrow transmission out through a burst of static, giving coordinates and code black. Whether anyone received it then, I still do not know. We began moving south along the road we had used coming in, only faster now, less order, more desperation dragged into shape by training. Snow had started again, thick and windless. Flames from Granite Echo lit the trunks behind us in pulsing red. Ahead, darkness closed like a tunnel. Morrow was failing. Black seeped through his collar and down his chest from the punctures the creature had made. Alvarez gave him something for pain while walking. He kept muttering that he could hear tapping inside his jaw. Shaw would not stop looking behind him. Harmon ranged off the road once, came back, and said, "They're pacing us in the trees." "How many?" Price asked. Harmon stared into the dark. "Enough." The first attack on the exfil did not come as a rush. It came as weather. Wind slammed through the corridor trees without warning, dumping powder from every branch at once and whiting out our lamps. In that wall of falling snow came voices. Pike ordering a halt. Bell warning contact left. Winters asking for help in a wet child's whisper. I shut it all out and fixed on Alvarez's pack in front of me. Then Morrow stepped off the road. Just one pace. As if answering someone beside him, Alvarez grabbed for him and missed the strap by inches. He vanished between two trunks. I heard him say very clearly, "I'm coming, Gunny." Then his scream tore through the storm. We plunged after him before Price could stop us, lights jerking through branches. I found Moreau on his back in a hollow with snow up to his shoulders, thrashing, rifle gone, one antler pinning his jacket to the earth, while a pale shape crouched over him, its head turned toward us too fast, mouth working, and spoke in Moreau's own voice from before the attack. "Too cold, Mercer." I fired. So did Alvarez. The rounds ripped it off him. It flowed backward into the trees with unnatural grace, leaving Moreau gasping and clawing at the antler spike punched through his web gear and into frozen ground. We tried to pull him free. He grabbed my sleeve with both hands. "Do not let it take my face," he said. Then the black seep at his neck pulsed. Not blood, movement. His pupils blew wide. His back arched. Something under the skin of his throat traveled up under the jawline, like a trapped finger. Alvarez saw it too. For one terrible heartbeat she hesitated because he was still Theo, still looking at us, still human enough to beg. Morrow started knocking his own teeth together. 3 times. Clack, clack, clack. Price made the call. 1 shot. Quick. Merciful. If mercy can exist in such a place. We left him in the hollow as snow began covering his face. That image stays with me, because half of him looked asleep. 8 moving now, if you count Henderson and Soren, and the rest as already outside the arithmetic of rescue. But 9 would come back from the woods. There was still one life between us, and the title people later gave the file. It was Harmon. We were maybe a mile from the abandoned state police unit when he stopped dead and raised his hand. Everyone around him froze too. He was listening, head tilted. "What is it?" Price whispered. Harmon frowned, as if trying to separate one sound from another. "Nothing," he said. That answer chilled me more than any scream. Woods are never silent. Not truly. There's always settling snow, Branch Creek wing flutter, distant cracking ice. The absence of all of it meant everything living nearby had gone still. Then the line of trees ahead opened, not physically, visually. The road seemed to stretch longer, straighter, flanked by pines evenly spaced like fence posts. In the distance, where there should be more dark and more snow, I saw warm yellow light from house windows and a gas station sign turning slowly. Civilian road. Safety. It hit every exhausted part of the brain like salvation. Shaw said, "We're out." "No." Harmon said immediately, "No, we are not." But Kessler had already taken 2 steps toward it, half blind with pain and fatigue. Price caught him. The lights ahead flickered, then resolved into hanging orbs between trees. Too high to be windows, too still to be lanterns. Eyes. Dozens. The road illusion collapsed. The trees rushed back into shape, and through them we saw the line they had formed. At least 7, maybe more, standing shoulder to shoulder among the trunks. Tall, thin, antlered, not charging, blocking. Intelligence lives in posture as much as action. You know when another force has chosen ground and is waiting for you to understand it. Price set the machine gun from Rourke's rig onto the snow berm and opened fire without waiting. Muzzle flashes strobed the whole tree line. Bodies twisted, dropped, rose again. One lost half an antler. Another folded backwards over a stump and kept moving on its hands. "Back!" Alvarez shouted. Too late. 3 knocks sounded behind us. They had completed the ring. What followed lasted maybe 3 minutes. In memory, it lasts hours. We broke right through dense spruce instead of staying on the road. Branches whipped our faces and snagged our packs. Snowshoes became anchors. Shaw lost one and kept running lopsided. Kessler stumbled every 10 feet. The creatures came in coordinated darts, not committing to melee unless one of us lagged. They wanted separation. Panic. Single bodies in black spaces. Price and I took turns firing rearward. Harmon led by instinct more than sight, choosing ground that kept us off deep drifts and away from ravines. More than once I heard something pacing above us in the branches, using weight lightly enough that snow barely fell. Then Shaw went down. He yelled once, sharp and surprised, and vanished at the waist through crust over a drainage cut. Alvarez reached him first. I turned to cover and saw one of them descending headfirst down a trunk toward us, limbs unfolding in deliberate sequence. It paused halfway, looked at me, and made the hand signal for hold. That broke something inside me. I fired until the trunk burst into pulp, and the creature dropped out of sight. Whether I killed it, I do not know. When I looked back, Alvarez had Shaw almost out of the cut. Then a voice came from the dark behind her. A woman's voice. Soft. Familiar. "Mommy." Alvarez froze. Every one of us heard the hitch in her breath. She had a daughter in Norfolk, 6 years old. She kept a folded crayon drawing in her breast pocket and took it out when mail was bad. More than once on the road north, she had shown us the bright crooked house and the giant orange sun. "Doc," I said. She did not move. "Doc, that is not her." The voice came again, closer this time, from somewhere no child could have stood. "Mommy, I'm cold." Alvarez made the smallest sound I have ever heard from an adult human being in pain. Then she moved exactly wrong. Not away. Toward it. Price shouted. Harmon lunged. The dark opened and arms like white roots closed around her from both sides of a trunk. She got one shot off. The muzzle flash lit her face for an instant, and in that instant she knew. Not daughter. Never daughter. Just hunger wearing the shape of longing. "Get him out." She screamed at us, meaning Shaw. Then the creatures took her backward into the trees. You might ask why we did not follow. We tried. 3 steps, maybe 4. Then the whole forest around us erupted with knocks and cries and movement, and Shaw was half-trapped. Kessler was bleeding, and Price had command the living. That is war stripped to bone. You choose who still has time in them. We pulled Shaw free and kept moving while Alvarez's final gunshot echoed once and was swallowed whole. That made 9 of us in motion. And that is how 9 came back from the frozen woods. Do not misunderstand that sentence. It sounds cleaner than the truth felt. We were not marching anymore. We were fragments of men dragging ourselves by will and drill, and the primitive refusal to be eaten alive. Harmon found the abandoned state police unit again by smell before sight. Coal vinyl, old fuel, the sweet rot now stronger than ever. The cracked windshield gleamed through the snow. For a delirious second it looked like sanctuary. Then Kessler pointed to the open door. Fresh tracks around it. Not ours. Price gave us the only chance we had. We bypassed the vehicle, cut hard downslope toward the frozen stream bed that paralleled the road, and used the gully for concealment. The cold there was vicious, trapped and unmoving. Ice crust snapped under us. One wrong step sent a leg, thigh deep into black water, and pain lanced like electricity. But the banks gave cover and broke the sight lines the creatures had been using. For 20 minutes we heard them searching above, on either side. No voices now. Just a 3-knock signal moving back and forth as they coordinated. Harmon eventually raised a fist and whispered, "They're losing us." Even then, no one relaxed. The pickup zone was never meant for this. It had been a convoy turnout, a wide cut in the woods where the snowcat had dropped us. If the convoy remained, if anyone had heard Kessler's transmission, if the black site handlers had not simply written us off of the facility, we might make it. If not, dawn was still hours away. We came up out of the stream bed just before 0100. The turnout lights were there, real this time, headlamps hooded low. engines idling, men shouting. I have never loved the sight of diesel smoke so much. Someone from the perimeter challenge line yelled halt. Identify. And Price answered with such force his voice cracked. We stumbled into sandbag positions and concertina, and the shocked faces of other Americans who had no idea what the woods behind us contained. Medical hands took Kessler and Shaw. Blankets went over Morrow's absence, over Alvarez's, over Bell's, Winters's, Rourke's, Pike's, Dupree's, though nobody said their names aloud yet. Somebody thrust hot metal cup coffee into my glove, and I dropped it because I could not unclench my fingers. An Army lieutenant with a clipboard started asking questions immediately. Price looked at him as if he were a ghost from a smaller world. Then the knocking came from the tree-lean. 3 clean wooden clacks. Every weapon on the line snapped up. Searchlights flooded the snowfield beyond the turnout. At first we saw nothing. Then, just inside the trees, one of them stepped into view. Only one, tall as the others. Antlers black against the light. Still as a monument. It had something hanging from one hand. A helmet. Pike's. It raised the helmet slowly, almost formally, and tapped it against the trunk beside its head. Clack, clack, clack. Then it vanished backward into dark. So smoothly, it looked like the forest had inhaled. The lieutenant began shouting for illumination rounds, perimeter extension, pursuit denial. Nobody pursued. Not after what we said. Not after the thermoscopes returned shapes in the woods, moving in deliberate circles just beyond effective range. Never rushing. Never presenting long enough to engage. By dawn, the tracks around the turnout had multiplied beyond counting, and then stopped as if whatever made them had simply chosen to stand elsewhere. The official record took 3 forms. The first was the one shown to next of kin: structural collapse, weather casualties, hostile wildlife interference, communications malfunction. The second was the one buried under classification: experimental signal platform breach, anomalous predatory entities, probable mimetic acoustic component, site destruction incomplete. The third form is mine. It is the one where I tell you the human details they sent away. Price never forgave himself for Winters. Kessler could not hear a voice through static again without shaking. Shaw tried to disappear into desk duty and drink and eventually a locked garage. Harmon moved back to Maine for 1 season, then left in midsummer and never returned north of Virginia. As for me, they debriefed us under fluorescent lights and sealed folders in the flat, careful language of people who want terror converted into manageable nouns. They asked about numbers, weight estimates, engagement distances, radio interference ranges. They asked if the creatures displayed pack hierarchy, tool use, territoriality. I told them yes. Yes to all of it. I told them they used terrain the way trained fighters use it. I told them they understood grief faster than commands. I told them they did not simply imitate voices. They selected the voice that would move you most. One man in a suit asked if we believed they were biological organisms or products of psychological contagion induced by environmental stress. I asked him if psychological contagion leaves bite marks in police dashboards and carries off armed adults through ceiling spaces. He did not ask another question. Months later, they flew us to identify recovered fragments from a granite echo site. Most of the lower chamber had vitrified. Stone melted. Copper ran. Human remains were partial at best. They told us the relay nexus had been destroyed. They told us no further anomalous transmissions had been recorded from the region. Then a recorder on the table clicked on by itself. No tape loaded. No power light. Just a click. And through its little dead speaker came 3 knocks. Clack, clack, clack. Nobody in that room moved. They transferred the evidence to another facility after that. Somewhere warm, I was told, as if climate could matter, as if whatever lived in those woods needed snow the way fish need water. I do not think it does. I think winter only made it easier to hear. Over the years, I tried to fold a memory into something survivable. Jobs, apartments, a marriage that did not last, long drives with the radio off, never camping again, never answering unknown callers after dark. Some winters were better than others. Then, in 2007, during an ice storm in Pennsylvania, I woke at 2:13 in the morning because something tapped my bedroom window 3 times. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. I did not open the curtain. I sat on the side of the bed with my old service pistol in both hands and listened to my own heart beating so hard it shook the sight picture. After a minute, maybe 5, maybe an hour, the tapping stopped. In the morning, there were no marks outside, only a fine line in the frost on the inside of the glass. Not a crack, a groove, as if a nail had been drawn lightly downward through ice. I want to tell you this ends with closure, that I am old now and fear is worn smooth, that whatever happened in 1995 stayed buried under a collapsed listening station in northern Maine. But there are things I know now that I did not know when I was young and armed and stupid enough to believe the world arranged itself along clean borders. There are places where old hunger and new technology touched and recognized each other. There are sounds not meant to be answered. There are forests that learn your name if you give it to the wrong machine. Every winter, somewhere in the northern tree line, hunters still report hearing loved ones call to them from the wrong direction after sunset. Wardens still find deer open from the inside out, as though something borrowed the skin and then changed its mind. Radio hobbyists still speak of voices that slip into dead frequencies during aurora, asking simple, warm human things. Are you there? Can you help me? Open the door. If you hear that in summer, I do not know what it means. If you hear it in winter, with snow holding every sound still and the trees standing black and straight as spears, leave. Leave before you decide to be brave. Leave before it uses someone you miss. And if, out in deep cold, you hear 3 patient knocks from somewhere ahead in the dark, understand what is happening. It is not trying to scare you away. It is telling the others where you are. The last thing I will give you is this. On the morning after we came out, after medics, after questions, after the sky turned pale over the turnout, and the search teams refused to enter the woods until daylight fully took hold, I sat in the back of the truck wrapped in army wool and looked at the frost blooming across the inside of the canvas flap. At first, it was only random white feathers spreading in delicate branching veins. Then the pattern thickened. 2 long crowns rose from the same point. A narrow face formed beneath them, and in the milky frozen pane, looking in at me from a shape made only of cold, I saw a reflection raise 1 long finger and tap once on the other side, then twice,